Another year, another smartphone competing for your wallet. The LG G6 is one of the major flagships you might be considering if you plan to upgrade your phone at all. So what's the deal with this thing? Well, I've been using it for a little over a week now, so I think it's time I share my thoughts on this new phone. And for full disclosure, they did send me this phone early for free to try out, but I'm obviously going to give an unbiased review, what I do like, what I don't like, everything in between. As you may know from last year, the previous LG G5 didn't really do so well, and it seems that LG took a much safer path this time around. There really aren't any gimmicks or overly ambitious design choices in the G6, which is fine with me. So let's start off with the physical features on the outside of the phone, starting with the display. It's definitely the first thing you'll notice when you turn the phone on because it basically takes up the entire front of the thing. But even though it's a big screen, the bezels are so small that it really doesn't feel like an oversized phone when you're holding it. And the corners of the display are also rounded, which I like. And it really is a great looking display. It's 5.7 inches with a 2880 by 1440 resolution, or 18 by 9 aspect ratio, and the panel type is IPS. This size and shape screen I think is pretty nice. It makes it a lot easier when scrolling through websites or Instagram feeds or whatever. Though it is pretty tall, so it can sometimes be tough to reach the top of the screen. At first I was skeptical at the choice of IPS over OLED, but that didn't last long. It's got great contrast, and I was impressed that it seems to be able to show blacks just as deep as OLED panels. And because it's IPS, it has the benefit of being slightly brighter than OLED and should have less risk of color shifting. For example, the color balance on the G6 looks spot on, and when I compared it to my Pixel XL, I didn't even notice that the Pixel almost has a yellow tint. So whether it was designed with a warmer white point, I'm not sure, but the G6 clearly looks to have more accurate colors here. And I should hope so, because the screen is also advertised to support Dolby Vision HDR. So that's also a plus if you like to watch movies on your phone. Continuing on to the rest of the body, on the front you have a front-facing 5 megapixel camera, a speaker, and that's about it. Then on the sides you have most of the standard stuff, volume up and down, SIM card and SD tray, headphone jack on the top, and on the bottom you have USB Type-C and speakers. No real surprises for any of that. On the back things get a little bit more interesting. We have the power button, which doubles as a fingerprint sensor, dual cameras, and a dual LED flash. The fingerprint sensor is nicely placed, it's easy to reach, and I like that it automatically unlocks the phone without having to actually press the power button. Though sometimes it's actually so fast that you can't really use it to look at your notifications on the lock screen. You basically have to double tap the screen to do that, or else it'll just skip right past it. As for the camera, I'll go more in depth into that later, but the reason that there are two is that one is wide angle and the other is a regular focal length. Now let's get into the internal specs that you can't see. The processor is a Snapdragon 821, not the latest 835, but still very fast. Then it's got a standard 4 gigabytes of RAM for a flagship, and 32 gigabytes of internal memory. It does have an expandable SD slot, but I still wish the internal storage was more than just 32, especially considering that the system takes up nearly a third of that, so I was kind of disappointed there. On the other hand, I am very pleased with the battery. It's 3,300 milliamp hours, a good size, and the battery life was a lot better than I expected. I can get several hours of screen on time, and even with the always-on display, the battery doesn't seem to drain that much. I expect this has a lot to do with Android 7 and its new battery optimization features. I'm also glad to see that they included wireless charging, which I am definitely a big fan of, you probably know that. And of course, you have Qualcomm Quick Charge 3.0 to charge up the battery as fast as possible. Other notable features include Gorilla Glass 5 on the back, but only Gorilla Glass 3 on the front. Doesn't really make sense to me why they wouldn't just put the stronger glass on both sides, or at least on the front. Apparently it's to save thickness, but if I had to guess, it's just a cost-saving decision. And yes, of course, it is waterproof with an IP68 rating, so unless you drop it into the bottom of a really deep pool or something, you won't have to worry about water damage. I even tested it myself under a shower, and as expected, no issues. It does wireless charging while still wet. Pretty cool. However, one big missing feature is a notification LED. Not sure why they didn't just add a small one. I mean, sure, there's an always-on display, but I'd prefer not to have to use it for the sake of battery. Plus, the always-on display is pretty dark anyway, making it hard to even see if you have a new notification at all, or which ones, and if you use the higher brightness version of it, it kills the battery. So I'd much rather just have a little LED that flashes different colors, much easier. Next, let's talk about performance and experience using the phone, starting with the camera. Both the rear cameras are 13 megapixels with the standard lens at 1.8 aperture and the wide-angle lens at 2.4. And I think it's nice that they include the two different focal lengths so you can get more in the shot if you want. But besides that though, the cameras are just painfully average. It doesn't seem to offer anything new from what we saw in last year's phones. Especially when some new phones like the Pixel are able to take outstanding images using multiple frame samples. I can only describe the image quality of the G6 as good, but nothing special. Moving on, let's talk about user experience. In terms of speed, it's great, as you'd expect from any flagship smartphone. Having used it, I haven't noticed any stuttering or lagging at all, and apps seem to open very quickly, very snappy and responsive. Not really anything else I can say about it other than that. With features, one big one is the inclusion of the native Google Assistant, which you can access by holding the home button. I'm a big fan of the Google Assistant, and I use it a lot more than I thought I would when I first heard about it, though I should point out that the Google Assistant is rolling out to all Android phones that are running at least Android 6.0, so you might already be able to get it on your phone. Now, the G6 is running Android 7.0, which is great, but I don't know why they didn't just launch it with 7.1, which has already been out for months. I definitely don't like that, because we know that carriers are notoriously slow at rolling out Android updates if they do at all, especially considering that, unlike 7.1, Android 7.0 is missing one of my favorite features, night light, which reduces blue light at night, making it a lot easier to see. However, luckily I did find a third-party app called Nightlight, which allows you to unlock the feature because it is actually in 7.0, just hidden. So if you're like me and you want that feature, you can look that up. Next, the G6 uses LG's UX 6.0 skin, which is just, To be fair, I'm not just picking on this skin, but I think that any skin besides stock Android are just unnecessary and stupid. I mean, the first thing I did was replace the home screen with the Google Now launcher. I wasn't really a fan of how the UX skin with the G6 gets rid of the app drawer and just shows all your apps on the home screen, which might be good for people who are like new to Android, but not for me. And I also don't know why it seems like all these skins disable a bunch of features. Like, the G6 disabled the System UI tuner. Why, LG? Why would you remove features? And of course, we can't forget about bloatware. This isn't really LG's fault, I guess. This happens with any phone you buy through a carrier. But if you buy a carrier-branded G6, be prepared to have a ton of pre-installed garbage apps that you can't delete. For example, with this AT&T version, do you have DirecTV? No? Well, too bad. You're not allowed to delete this useless app that takes up over 100 megabytes. But there is hope. Apparently LG is making an unlocked version of the G6 that as of now is coming soon, so you might want to consider getting that if you hate bloatware like me. Alright, now don't think that I'm going to complain about everything. There are some features that they added that I do actually like. For example, they have this cool option for live wallpapers, which are basically moving backgrounds for the home screen. And if you dig deep enough into the settings, they have a bunch of free ones that you can download from their site. You basically choose a 360-degree photo, and then you have a lot of options for how you want it to move. I just have it set to auto scroll, where it just kind of rotates it slowly, but if you want, you can have it use the gyroscope to rotate the image along with the phone, which I think is awesome. Though this effect does require more battery usage, so I ended up disabling it for now at least. But still, super cool, actually one of my favorite features, especially since they have so many you can choose from that are free. Another small but important feature I think that they added is the battery percentage in the status bar. For the life of me, I do not know why stock Android does not have this, so it's nice to see this option. So let's go over some of my overarching thoughts about the G6. In general, I think it's a worthy flagship. Definitely a good phone that ticks all the boxes. It's got a great screen with top-notch image quality, which I think is probably the best hardware feature. But judging by recent announcements, this won't be the only smartphone this year with thin bezels. The dual camera feature is nice. I could see a lot of people using that for sure, and the picture quality is reasonable. And I do like the physical design of the phone overall. It looks very modern and slick. I'm a fan of it. Though it's very clear that LG didn't want to take any risks with the G6. There's not really any one feature that makes me say, wow. But the phone overall is satisfying. If you get this phone, you won't have anything to complain about for sure. For some of you, that perhaps is the most important thing. You don't really care about a lot of bells and whistles as long as it just does everything that you want and it works. But I feel like the G6 will be a tough sell when you compare it to other new flagships with more headline-catching features that are at the same price point. So those are just really all my thoughts. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask me down in the comments and let me know what you think as well. If you want to keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here. You can click on those. And if you want to subscribe, I make new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Should be worth it. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. And as usual, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.